All right, we are live. It takes a few minutes for LinkedIn to notify everyone that we're live. So while we're waiting for LinkedIn to notify everyone and for people to join, for the benefit of those that are watching the recording and will see everything from the beginning, I'll just say my greetings. Um, my name is Andrea Henderson. I am an executive talent strategist, a partner with DHR Global in the life science, healthcare, nonprofit, CEO, and board practice groups. So I help companies identify transformational leaders that make impact on the organization in the C-suite and in boardrooms. Today, I am joined by Karen Spencer, having have the great pleasure of speaking with Karen, uh, who is managing director. She is a national leader in entrepreneurship through acquisition. She has co-founded the Search Funder and developed the ETA Launch Hub channel. That's a mouthful, so I wanted to make sure I got that right and
Thank you.
see if there's anything that you want to add to that.
Yeah, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm excited to talk to you, and I have to tell you that there was so much interest in the topic when I posted and shared, and I don't know why, but let's start by kind of giving context. Yes. So, and can you tell us what it is and how it works?
Yeah. So I'm going to start kind of big picture because some of folks may not be familiar with some of the terms like entrepreneurship through acquisition, and think about that as doing the other thing besides a startup. Most people know about startups; they're very very glamorous. Most people don't know that you can go out and buy a business, and you don't have to be a Wall Street financier to do it. So that's the broad category called entrepreneurship through acquisition. There are different models or methods within entrepreneurship through acquisition. Sometimes you'll hear about people who buy distressed companies to try to put them back into shape and grow them. A search fund is completely different from that. If you think about it as a way for a first time business buyer and operator to mitigate the risks of entrepreneurship generally and to mitigate the risk of buying a business. So it avoids some of the common traps that are out there for somebody who may not have operated a business before. Is it okay if I go through a little bit of history? So today, you probably like if you read business journals and things like that, you may have heard of the term search fund, or you may know somebody who's doing a search fund. There's various models. It is global, and that is just in recent years. But in order to understand what it is, I have to give you a little bit of history. Back in the early 80s, around 83, 84, at Stanford, a professor, Irv Grossbeck, came up with the idea of why not put mentors around a graduating MBA student, teach them up on what a good business looks like. And these mentors will pay them to go out and look around the country for a good business to buy. Those mentors and investors will get preferential treatment if a business is found, and the MBA graduate will become a CEO of a business that they have selected for themselves and have now bought with the help of lenders and the investors. So that was the idea, and that is referred to today as the traditional or core model of search funds. And fast forward to about the mid-teens, there really was nothing else out there in the search fund space. It was a very closed network. Essentially Stanford, Harvard, Chicago Business School, ESA in Spain were doing it, but that was it. But by about the mid-teens, there had been enough people doing it who had been successful at it that the model started to evolve. And there's lots of different flavors today. There's what is called the self-funded search. So rather than taking investor money up front, you go out and you finance the search yourself. Maybe you keep your day job and you're searching part-time. Maybe you have savings, or your spouse has a great job, and so you can spend the time to look for a business to buy. And there's also the incubated or accelerator model. And that one I find very interesting. And I think we'll be talking more about it in this conversation. But the idea is you're with a cohort of other people that have been selected through an application process. And the accelerator pays you a stipend to search for a business to buy, and then you become CEO. The terms are different depending upon what model you use, but I at least want, if you're interested in the subject, I want you to at least start knowing that there are different methods of going about it. And Andrea, I believe you may be muted, or else our audio gerbils are getting back at us again. We had a little bit of trouble with the audio. That was unexpected. We've been trying to troubleshoot it.
Can you hear me now? I am trying
Yes.
something different.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that was such a great introduction to entrepreneurship through acquisition and the history and origins, um, and the search fund. For me, I was introduced by watching a YouTube video. I think it was Cody Sanchez, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
And she talks about it, but not as in detail as you. And basically, her whole thing is buy a boring business. That's what she likes to say. And as I talk to so many executives in this environment, who many of whom are very nervous about being able to find a job that will allow them to support their families in the lifestyles that they've been accustomed to, right? They've been successful. They have all of this experience, they're mature, and they are typically high income earners. And they're not getting the response from the market that they're used to. And so they're concerned. So, my question is, what happens if you never get a job again? If no one ever gives you another job in your life, what are you going to do? And it's very sobering thought. But one of the solutions that I thought could be helpful is this entrepreneurship through acquisition. And while there, I think, many approaches, I'm always thinking of, my aunts and uncles who just were entrepreneurs out of necessity, many of who've built businesses that are now extremely successful, but they don't have any successors. Their kids are not interested in taking over the family business. Their kids are doctors and lawyers and other professionals, and they've invested in those careers. So they don't want to take over the family business. I'm thinking, what happens to those businesses when Aunt Hetty Mae or Uncle Joe decide they don't want to work anymore? They don't know about exits. They just shut down the business.
Exactly. And there are, besides myself, there are other people out there thinking about those very questions. I'm going to peel back some layers because you gave me a lot to work with. The first being is, if you like are concerned about um, the market, your ability to get the next role or anything like that, make sure you're saving money, saving that income so that you have a cushion for doing entrepreneurship if it is by necessity. Occasionally, you will hear in this market, and I'm going to take a quick sip so that I don't have a frog in my throat the whole time.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Occasionally in this market, you will hear investors and other people frowning on people who are buying a job. It's what it's called. I do not. I think it's very important that we all are employed in whatever way that we possibly can be, to give back to our communities and our families and all of that. But there is a bit of a dividing line. Sometimes it has to do with age. So the older you are, the more perception of that happening. There are ways to mitigate it, and we do talk about that within the ETA Launch Hub. And from my perspective, it's about really about what do you want to get out of the process. There are a lot of people out there who want to just buy a single business and something that can put their kids through college, help them save for retirement, maybe be able to transfer some wealth to the next generation. And then there's others who want to be, financial moguls, wrestling it up on Wall Street. I don't think there's any wrong path. I think that the only wrong thing to do is pick the path that's not right for you.
Yeah. I became fascinated with this not only after watching the YouTube video, but I met a woman who bought a FedEx route. Um, and she just said, she made it seem so simple. I don't know, if after years and years, it works out to be as simple as she laid it out, but she bought the business intact. Um, she apprenticed with the owner before the owner transitioned. So she learned the business as an insider, as an apprentice. And she said the business sort of runs itself because she bought the operations managers, the drivers, the assets, the trucks and everything. And all she needed to do is to make sure everything continued to run smoothly. So I don't know if that's an oversimplification, but I wonder how often that's possible.
Yeah, and have you ever been on a vacation where like one of your party got food poisoning and somebody else like cut their foot and then something else happened and they all get back and they tell you, "Oh my God, Mexico was great."
No,
I,
I can't say
I've
that I
had
have.
that happen, like when you piece through the details. So, I think I don't know this person, so her experience may be atypical,
Okay.
and sometimes we like to forget. Like I have friends who have multiple children. I'm like, how did you like forget the first delivery after? Like I remember you were like in labor for like 36 hours. So
Yeah.
sometimes we kind of gloss over the trouble spots, and I would say like for it to be easy, you have to be very well prepared or experienced. You have to know what a good business looks like. When you buy that company, they've got to have been run reasonably well with a management team that is trustworthy and that sticks around. So it is possible to have all of that. I just don't want anybody to go in thinking that that is a given and that they're entitled to that. It takes a lot of work. And one thing that you mentioned earlier that I'd like to just loop back to before we move on to other things is the boring business side of things. So there are you have a background. You may have a profession, an industry, maybe a service with the military that gave you leadership training, hobbies, community service. You may have different competencies and skill sets. So, what is a boring business for you may be different than what's a boring business for the marketplace, right? And I would uh, encourage people to start there. I see a lot of people who are like hot on HVAC businesses, and they're kind
Mhm.
of hot in the market right now. And I just wrote a blog post like on this very subject, like don't buy a business like a tween. Just because it's really hot doesn't mean it's right for you. So if you grew up, and I'm going to be a little bit stereotypical here, if you grew up listening to classical music, studying Chaucer, talking about philosophy, and you tell me you want to own a HVAC business, I'm going to ask you whether you think you can manage folks who may not have even graduated from high school, and are you going to have the ability to connect with them? You may have something in your background or personality that allows it, but that's going to be one of the things I would ask you.
I see where you're going. I see what you're saying. Um, because during the pandemic, I started a cleaning business with my son, which, if you know me, is hilarious because I hate to clean. But I figured you don't need to love to clean in order to run the business. But I don't know, that the jury's still out on that.
It can, or you may not have to love the business, but I would say you have to love the type of problem you're solving for your customer, or you have to love your customer.
Yeah.
If you really want to have a good experience in entrepreneurship, I believe that.
Yeah, that's something that I heard Myron Golden say too. He's a um, popular business guru. And he said, yeah, you have to, the key to success is to love the people and to love them so much that you want to solve their problems and solve their problems so well that they'll pay you well for those solutions. So I understand that. That's great. Um, so, why do you think entrepreneurship through acquisition (ETA) is uniquely suited for mid to late career professionals? I have a perspective, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've thought this for a long time now, and the market is the investor pool is catching up to this. I think mid career, later career, you actually have seen a thing or two, and
Mhm.
therefore you know a thing or two, so you've got wisdom to begin with. You're likely to have managed people and people of different backgrounds as well. You are likely to have a broad range of skill set, and I hate to say it, but like being someone like who has had to fire an employee, the way I look at it is very different than someone who's fresh faced out of
Mhm,
school
mhm,
and it's
mhm.
never happened. When I went to business school, I had classes with the MBAs, and their answer many times to a lot of the questions, the dilemmas that were happening. Well, if the person doesn't do what I say, I'm going to fire them, right? And you know that it's kind of tough. You've been through their wife's cancer diagnosis,
Ugh.
their kids, first communion. Like, if they're on your team, these are real people to you, and you understand their lives and the impact that it will have. And just because They may not do what you want at that given moment, may not be the time to be firing them, right? So you've got to know how to develop and grow your team, and then understand when things are no longer a good fit, how to appropriately transition them onto something else.
Yeah. Those are great points. And to add on to that, like you said, when you're in your mid-career, your late career, you have the experience, you've managed people, you've experienced challenges, you've developed the technical, operational skills and the people skills. Um, Hopefully you also have some financial cushion, which most people don't want to touch. I get it, right? You build it, and it's dire emergencies, it's there for dire emergencies, but you typically might have something, and I think that's important too.
Yeah.
um when go down that entrepreneurial path, um you have some confidence in understanding the world, um and so those things transition. And for some, not for all, for some, the other options are limited. So when people come to me and telling me, I'm facing ageism, but I still want to work. I have a lot to offer. I have a lot of energy. I think this is a good solution. Um,
And I am seeing more and more of that through the people that I meet. And I think it's perfectly appropriate. I think it's something to think about. I would say the sooner you start thinking about it and planning for it as a potential exit strategy in your career, the better off you are. And in many ways, that's why I created the ETA Launch Hub. I was seeing folks all ages quitting their day job on December 31st. I would meet them somewhere between March and July, and they're thinking that they can buy a business in 6 months, and they're starting to run out of cash, right? And they may or may not have just gotten their website up, right? There's so many things that you can do before that quit date that can help you really ramp up for this entrepreneurial path.
yeah, that's so critical, and I want to talk about that. Um, can you give us maybe 2 to 3 things that you can do to prepare, if this is a road that you're contemplating?
Certainly. The first thing I would do is take an inventory of yourself, like really think about what it is that you want, what you're good at, what you like doing, what you don't like doing, what you wish you would never could want to do ever again, that kind of thing, and take an inventory, and then of your person, and then take an inventory of your financial side. And that is important. I know that there's a lot of people out there who will tell you about, like, you can buy a business with no money down, um, and it can happen. I just worry that that if you don't have a financial cushion, you may not be prepared after the sale for what you need to do. In Andrea, you mentioned the person who bought the FedEx route. What I've been seeing more of is people buying what I would call micro businesses. Search funds tend to be directly in that small to mid-sized business category. And these smaller businesses, I've been like a couple of the fellows in my ETA Launch Hub, they actually have bought the smaller kind of micro business. It was kind of their starter business to just get a feel for how to run one. And now they're looking to level up to something where investors might be interested. So it's kind of fascinating how the trend is. I would say that there is no one model that's going to work for everybody. There are different flavors of models out there. So probably the third thing I would do is do your homework. A lot of people fall in love with the first thing that they hear about. I would say I would liken it to, you're in New York, you want to go to Los Angeles, somebody tells you about the Chicago route. Chicago sounds great. You've got the comedy, you've got the music, you got the food, you got the sports, you got everything. And then you discover on the way there that, oh, wow, it is really, really cold, a lot of snow in March, and you're not prepared for it, right?
Yes.
So that's how I would liken that journey too.
Yeah.
Know the
It's
route.
fun. It's funny. So again, another story um, to just punctuate that. There was another business. I'm fascinated with entrepreneurship. So I'm constantly evaluating options. And there's a woman by the name of Danielle Pierce, and she has a very large following, and she talks about property preservation. Again, everybody always makes it sound so easy, right? Property preservation is really easy. This is what you do, these things. And so at the time, it just sounded like a good business model. You care for distressed properties, right? Bank owned properties, foreclosed properties, and you just take care of them on behalf of the bank. So I went through this whole process of learning this and getting contracts. And I will tell you, one of my first assignments was a foreclosed property, and the owner, the bank, wanted me to go in and see if there were any dead bodies or dead animals inside the property. That's when I knew it wasn't for me. Um, so I had some other experiences where I was like, I don't like this. I do not like. I don't care how much money you can make. I do not like this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there are some businesses where you can make a ton of money and they may not be right for you. If whenever anybody talks to me, I always tell them I would not buy a pesticide company because I do not want to think about bugs. I do not want to think about people crawling under houses or into attics or whatever it is that they do for a bug. So yeah, and it's just me. Other people don't mind. That's okay, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's some people that are just like, it's a simple thing. You just go and you check, and but the very idea of it freaked me out.
Yeah.
So I knew it wasn't for me. So do you want to talk a little bit about and I know you talked some about it, but the ETA launch hub, or what you do and how you help people who are on this journey?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you. The ETA Launch Hub started from the idea that many searchers go through the same learning journey, and after many years in this space, I was seeing them make the same mistakes over and over again. Not because they weren't bright, not because they hadn't done their homework, not because they weren't brilliant or industrious enough. It was just because it's the first time you've ever done it. And so, what I wanted to do was take the lessons learned through hundreds of interviews that I had done and thousands of conversations that I'd had, take those lessons learned and put it in a manageable and paced program for my fellows. And I thought it was going to end up being just like a 90-day program, a pre-accelerator of sorts, and it has just expanded. So now we are year round. We do begin everybody with the 90-day program, and I do that for pedagogical reasons. I know there's a lot of 1 day, 3-day seminars and things like that. But I really believe that you need time to think and reflect about what you're learning. And it's more like a lot of the learning process is more circular, like you don't feel like you're moving forward, but you are in slow rotations. And I do believe that the 90 days helps you get a few of those rotations in while you're learning. So we meet monthly to do peer mentoring, to have guest speakers come in on important issues for our fellows. And next month, we're starting a CEO roundtable. We have enough fellows who have acquired businesses or are operating businesses and want to learn how to buy a business and to speak with investors about it, that we are now starting the CEO roundtable. So we're kicking that off in June. The program is open to everyone to apply. I will say that our fellows are predominantly people of color. I was very pleased in the last cohort. We had 30 or 40% women within the cohort, which is very rare. And they were women of color. So, and very exciting, backgrounds and really interesting people, very lovely people, like people I want to hang out with. So
Oh,
thank you
nice.
for giving me the opportunity to chat up our fellows.
Yeah, I suspect you'll see more women of color, particularly because of what's going on in the economy.
Mm,
And there's an article going around sharing the statistics about the percentage of Black women that were displaced in April, that was released with the April jobs report. So that
right,
a very high percentage, and I think that's tied to the displacement of federal employees.
right.
So I suspect that your cohorts will swell with Black women, and so
The
the
more the merrier.
impetus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm happy that they have that option. Um, Now I buried the lead a little bit because two other things that I wanted to share. One is that we're talking about buying businesses, and a lot of people say to me, I don't have any money to buy a business, because they think that the amount required is so huge. If you think about buying a business, you think about millions. And even, thinking about financing millions of dollars to buy a business is extremely intimidating for people. So I want to tell you what I'm thinking, and you can tell me how crazy and off the path it is. But and we talked about this a little bit. I think that you can approach some people with a proposal that says, let me apprentice in your business, learn the business, and take over the business without a cash infusion, like without buying it. And I will pay you in an annuity over X number of years, a percentage of the business. So, Uncle Joe, Aunt Hattie Mae, when you retire and you shut down the business, you get nothing else from it. But if you let me take it over, I will continue to pay 10%, 20% for the next 10, 20 years, and you'll have more than not doing anything with it. So it's a viable exit. What do you think about that strategy?
So there's a couple of pieces to it. There are seller notes. You can get seller financing, and a lot of this is going to depend upon the relationship you have with the seller of the business, right? If they trust you, if they're trustworthy, if they feel like you can actually run the business,
Mhm.
you can set up a seller note. I would not do as high as 20% because then you're essentially doing credit card interest rate. But there are seller notes out there. I would be really hesitant on, if I were like sitting in the shoes of a lender, if the person was coming to me and saying, I'm not going to put any money into this transaction. So if you're going to go that route, you're probably going to go majority seller financing. And that does happen. And I know there's podcasts out there. My particular focus is on businesses where you're likely to need lender and investor funding. So a big enough size that you need that. And some of that has to do with mitigating some risks as well. So if let's say the barbershop, if everything depended on Hattie Mae's personality,
Yeah.
you can have a situation where you may have the skills that that person had, but the clients start walking elsewhere, and that happens, right? Or
Hmm.
there's relationships.
Hmm.
A lender was telling me last year about a situation where the buyer purchased the business, thought everything was great. And then it turned out that the owner of the business had been in a business mentoring circle. And
Hmm.
so when he left the circle because he had retired, um, the other folks left, the his customers left. So he had a whole contingent of customers just leave, right?
Um,
That he had been relying on.
mm, yeah, that's interesting. I see this. Well, I've seen it. I won't say I see it often, but a situation I know where someone took over a restaurant, um, and the original chef who made the restaurant successful, uh, or the owner who mentored the chefs, um, you know, left the business, and then the food quality went down, and the customers left, and the reputation tanked, and things like that. So that is something to think about.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you highlight what's called key employee risk, right?
Hmm.
If there's somebody who's really central to the company, you really want to keep them on, and you want to keep them happy. And a lot of this is what's called change management. Most people do not like change, right? Most people like go kind of forcibly into it, and even then they're resistant, right? If your doctor gives you a diagnosis that you're pre-diabetes, you don't immediately stop eating your scoop of ice cream at night. Like that very second, you've got to make a lot of change, and leading people through that process can be quite tricky, and you
Yeah.
don't know before you bought the company what actually happened. Like I talked with one person, and she did not realize that the prior owner had done a lot of berating of employees, and it had been a toxic environment. So you don't kind of know what you're inheriting sometimes. And I don't want to scare people off who have a genuine interest. My goal is really to help you be realistic about the benefits and risks of entrepreneurialism, and to go in with your eyes wide open so that you can mitigate those risks. You can understand what the downsides are. You can, kind of pre-plan. Okay, so how am I going to, if there are two employees that are crucial to this business, how am I going to manage them and manage that process? And I've and I don't want anybody to think that the people who are identified as key employees are always key employees. Sometimes you don't hit it off with them. Sometimes they're jerks. One of the first people I interviewed, the so-called key employee, got drunk on transition day, said something inappropriate, and was very, very awful to work with. And the new CEO was like, "Do I fire this person today, or what?" They did not do it. And then once that person left, the company actually got better, which was good, and fortunate for them. So you're dealing with human beings, so you have that messiness.
Yeah. Well, Karen, if any of your students or um, business owners in your network or roundtable need help with that key employee risk or concentrated, uh, need some succession planning assistance, let me know. I'd be happy to
Oh,
come and help them. The other thing that I wanted to mention before we wrap up is that as I was sharing the information about this event with my network, I got at least one person who said to me, well, no, one person who said to me, I'm interested in selling my business. And I said, well, you should talk to Karen. Now, I don't know if that's what you do, if people are trying to organize exits, but I put it on you, and I will make an introduction, and maybe you can direct her on where to go if it's not you.
and the interesting part is I know enough people that I might be able to refer to a couple of potential buyers. So happy to do that. I do not do the fixing up to get ready to sell, although there's some days where I think I ought to go into that side as well, just to
Mhm.
understand it better. But I'm happy to refer them to people who can help with that and help prepare them for the transition. uh, very I'm always happy to make connections. There are some days where I feel more like the community librarian, because I'm always providing that historical information and the data and referring folks to where they need to go to be successful.
Yeah, it sounds like you need to set up some type of online course or online repository so you can just refer people and it can walk them through it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly what I'm working on right now. How did you know?
well, I didn't get that fancy business degree for nothing. This was so great. I'm not seeing comments.
Okay.
Usually, we can open up for questions, but for some reason, the technology gods are not working
Yeah.
with me today.
I do have one thought I'd like to do as we head towards closing, because I've talked a lot about the risks because there are a lot of success stories out there, and it's really hard to find the not successful story. And I get to hear them. There are people who buy a business, and it turns out the business is not
Mhm.
a good fit, and they
Mhm.
kind of knew it at the beginning and sort of put that under the rug, and so they're not happy that way. It turns out people search for a business and they are unable to locate the one that they want in the time frame that they have to be able to
Mm.
do it. And that does happen. I would say if you look at the stats, your odds of buying a business are much higher than doing a startup. So, like, basically, 1 out of every 10 startups makes it to, I think, the like year 3 or 4 or 5 mark, and then 6 out of 10 people who genuinely seek to buy a business actually secure one. But the average from the data that I look at, and this is just the search fund space, this is not outside of that, is about 20 months. And it's been in that range for a long time. So it takes a while to do it. There are lots of benefits to being an entrepreneur, so I want to speak about that. I've been in the search fund world as a startup entrepreneur, which always sounds sort of strange, but if we could have bought it to be able to do it, we would have done it. But we had to build it to be able to do it, and to serve the needs of the community. And I have grown so much as an individual, as a leader, in ways that I never, ever imagined. It can be, you definitely have to have a sturdy stomach on some days as an entrepreneur, but the great days, the successful days are absolutely I don't even know. I want to say luminescent. I That's how it's just, they're absolutely amazing. So the highs are incredibly high. The lows, as I've mentioned, can be incredibly low. But it's your baby, and you get to watch it grow up and see what it becomes, and that's always very exciting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, if I were just to recap, what really interested me is the ability to run something without that risk and that startup risk, right? You're
Sure.
buying into something that's proven and profitable from, so that the opportunity to sort of buy a job, right? Um, the opportunity to potentially get into something that is, without a big cash outlay potentially.
Yeah.
Um, and to buy into a industry or function or work um, that you want to do, right? You're choosing it. You're not waiting for somebody to choose you. You're choosing it. um,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
can do that at any age, with any demographic, woman, any identity, purple hair, um, you know so I just,
Yeah.
that the equal opportunity of it really um, impresses me.
And I think I should add to your wonderful list the opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. So just because the person who sells the business did not have a successor doesn't mean that you can't have a successor in the business or
Oh,
continue ownership of it. So that and as you know, intergenerational wealth in America is a significant driver of where people's status is socioeconomically.
yeah, I love that. And the number of people who contact me and say, "Can you help my kid find an internship?"
And your audio went out on me. And
Did,
the gremlin is back. Your audio went out on my end. I'm hoping other people heard because it sounded like it was a good anecdote about the internships.
oh, no, no. And so because of the tech issues, I'm using my phone and I got a phone call. So that's
Oh,
why it went out.
okay.
Um, I was just thanking you for speaking with me today about this topic, and I know it's very early where you are, so I appreciate you making the sacrifice of some good rest to uh, to talk. I got a text message that there are some comments that I can't see, so maybe afterwards we can go in and
Oh my goodness, there are. I can see them.
you can't, well, I still can't see them. So maybe, so anybody who's made a comment, thank you so much for coming. And we'll go into the comments afterwards and answer your questions or address your concerns.
Yes, I
So,
happy, and I am on LinkedIn. You can book time with me. I give launch your journey sessions every month. So if you just have questions about becoming a startup or acquisition entrepreneur, please sign up for that. Happy to do it. I want people to who want to be on this route and have a successful and wonderful experience. So uh, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you for having me.
oh, thank you so much. And I'm, I'm very interested. So we're going to stay connected. I know that I'm going to be
Oh,
speaking with
for
your
sure.
community at some point soon too. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen. I'm
Bye
going to
bye.
end the stream now. Have a good afternoon. And Karen,